Good afternoon, Judge Schumacher. Please take a seat, and when you are comfortable, you may begin with your opening statement.
Good afternoon. It's good to be back in this seat. My name is Julie Schumacher. I'm a district court judge for the 3rd Judicial District, which consists of 16 counties in northwest Iowa. First, I want to thank the members of the commission for the gift of your time to this extremely important commission. I'm especially grateful for the opportunity I had to meet with commissioners on an individual basis, both with those I met on my previous journey on the Iowa Court of Appeals and with the 4 new commissioners that stepped forward for this really important work. So thank you for that. In what I consider to be the 20 most important minutes of my legal career today, I want to share with you a brief background of my personal history, my legal work and experience, and what qualities I can bring to the Iowa Court of Appeals. I grew up in northwest Iowa. With the exception of furthering my education, I have lived my entire life in Iowa. While I lost my father over 20 years ago, my mom still lives on the same acreage in rural Sioux County. I moved to Denison for my first job after law school and stayed in Crawford County. So I essentially moved from the northernmost county in District 3B to the most southern county in District 3B. So if you were to drive in Denison today, probably the first thing you would notice is the water tower that says "It's a Wonderful Life," which pays tribute to the home of Donna Reed. But for my family, it really has been a wonderful place to raise my daughter, who turned 20 last month and will begin her 2nd year of college in 13 short days. So as excited as she is to go back, I'm sad to see her go. With respect to my legal experience, I've been a continuous member of the Iowa Bar for over 26 years. This commission, in part, is made up of attorneys who have chosen to specialize in an urban area, and some attorneys who have chosen a more rural practice as a general practice. For my part, I have chosen in the past to be a county seat lawyer in Crawford County, Iowa for 20 years, then a judicial officer as a district associate judge, and then as a district court judge. These are experiences I would respectfully suggest to the commission qualify me for nomination to the Iowa Court of Appeals. As my written application reflects, my private practice emphasized in 3 areas which come in front of the Court of Appeals in large volumes: criminal work, family law work, and juvenile court work. My private practice was heavily rated in family law. I handled over 500 family law cases, specializing in areas of complicated agricultural dissolutions and custody disputes. And I was also involved in juvenile court work in my private practice, an area that is ever increasing in front of the Iowa Court of Appeals. In that juvenile arena, I represented parents in defense work, and then as guardian ad litem for children, and then later as the lead prosecutor of a busy docket in a rural county. During that same time period, I was counsel for a major adoption agency, traveling across the state representing the agency and birth parents, which involved attendance at hearings and the drafting of documents, including contracts, and the most important, consent determination of parental rights, probably the most important document I've ever drafted. These issues and cases are what Court of Appeals sees on a daily basis. And while the Iowa Court of Appeals is heavily rooted in areas of criminal law, family law, and juvenile law, the Court of Appeals also sees cases in smaller numbers involving civil litigation, administrative law, and transactional law. And while my written application speaks heavily to the areas I believe come in front of the Court of Appeals most often, criminal law, family law, and juvenile law, as a county seat lawyer, I was exposed on a daily basis to issues involving real estate transactions. I conducted title opinions. I drafted farm leases and farm terminations. My law office had a busy taxation practice, so in addition to the traditional areas of law, between December and April, we worked not only in those areas, but also prepared tax returns. I was the assistant city attorney for Denison for 18 years, which involved drafting of ordinances, city codes, and prosecuting cases on behalf of the city, including condemnation proceedings, ordinance violations and enforcements, and statutory violations. Administratively, I was involved in those matters through representation of school boards, school districts, teachers, and superintendents. I've been honored to serve the state of Iowa as a judge for over the last 6.5 years, both as a district associate judge and a district court judge. And while certainly being a judge is not a requirement for this appellate position, I believe that experience is invaluable in the preparation for this appellate role. When practicing, I tried hundreds of cases as a private practitioner, as a prosecutor, and as an assistant city attorney. As both a district associate judge and district court judge, I tried the same number of cases, not only involving criminal law, family law, and juvenile law, but also civil matters such as malpractice, contract disputes, real estate concerns, and probate proceedings. In summary, I believe the following attributes distinguish me from the other worthy candidates. Number one, diversification of practice. The Court of Appeals is the court of last resort for many Iowans. I believe I've worked in the areas that come before the Court of Appeals most often in large volumes: family law, criminal law, and juvenile law. However, I also have extensive experience in administrative and civil matters and diversified my practice through being the city attorney and private litigation. Number two, judicial experience, including courtroom experience and judicial writing since being selected as a judge in December of 2012. Since that time, I've had the opportunity every day to work on cases that are very impactful to citizens of Iowa. I believe I'm the only applicant that comes before you with both district associate judge experience and district court experience. Being on the bench has brought a new perspective to the inner workings of the court system. I also have extensive writing experience in the Indian Child Welfare Act, federal and state. I've authored hundreds of district court rulings and thousands of juvenile court rulings. As an appellate judge, you are reviewing the trial court level, and I believe that trial court experience, both as an attorney and as a judge, is critical. Currently, the appellate bench, Iowa Court of Appeals, has less than half of the sitting judges that were trial court judges. Number three, work ethic. As a public servant of the state of Iowa, I'm dedicated to the fair and expedient administrative justice as reflected in my 2210 reports. Just as in private practice, I work hard every day to make sure the work is done in a quick fashion. And as a district court judge, we have access to limited resources. Our sub-district has 8 district court judges, 4 district associate judges, and 1 juvenile judge, but currently no law clerks. What that translates is into many late nights and weekends of work for trial court judges. My history of both work as an attorney and as a judge demonstrates that I am not an 8-to-5 judge. That's the way I practice as an attorney, as I'm aware most of the attorneys on this panel practice as well. In drafting rulings, I ensure that the ruling is written for the losing party to make sure that they are heard. And last, but certainly not least, I bring geographic diversity to the Iowa Court of Appeals. I would suggest it is important for all areas of the state to be represented on an appellate level. Northwest Iowa does not have any representation on either the Iowa Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, in spite of being the second largest district in the state. And while it is true that all judges are applying the same law across the state, it is important for citizens, lawyers, trial court judges to have representation in their community at the appellate level. And with that, Madam Chairperson, I would respectfully reserve my reigning time for questions of the Commission.
Thank you. And we have some questions for you, and we will begin with Ms. Conover.
Judge, you've been on the bench either as a district associate judge or now as a district court judge for almost 7 years. What was the hardest thing for you transitioning from private practice to the bench, and what tools did you use to try to overcome whatever those challenges were?
Thank you for that question. I practiced in the same law firm for 18 years, so my partners were like family, and going from that atmosphere to the district court bench, being a district court judge is very isolating, so that was different to me. That is one aspect of the Court of Appeals I would welcome, is that collaborative approach. You're in a panel and not just in isolation. But the tools I took from my private practice and prosecution benefited me on the appeal. My writing skills, my ability to communicate with people, particularly pro se's. When I became a district associate judge, you're dealing with a lot of pro se people. So those were all skills I was able to use on the bench. Thank you.
Mr. Goodman. Mr. Bloom. I'm not going out of order. Mr. Bloom.
I thought she was trying to shake it up a bit here.
I was just checking to see if you were awake.
See them all laughing around the table. I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Spies.
Thank you. Judge, I enjoyed our meeting together in Iowa City, and you and I discussed the judicial performance reviews that are done by the bar members of the judicial district in which you serve and have served so long. How have those reviews influenced the way you judge or influenced your attitude toward judging in general?
I would say that my work is not impacted by my performance reviews. However, I'm very proud of those performance reviews. And fortunately or unfortunately, because I was a district associate judge and then a district court judge, I was reviewed twice in 6 years. So I've got to be on the ballot twice, even though I've only been on the bench almost 7 years. And both of those times I received high remarks. The first time, I believe, one of the highest in the district as far as my performance reviews. So I think those remarks are very important for the commission to take a look at. They reflect what the attorneys see and how a judge not only works from the bench, but how their writing is perceived as well. So while I try not to be swayed by public opinion, I am happy with those results.
Thanks.
Mr. Hoytik.
Judge, one of the questions we've been asking today, or trying to figure out, is there are applicants who are district associate judges, there are applicants who are district judges. You have experience as both. Can you educate us a little bit about how the district associate judge experience would translate to the Court of Appeals and compare that a little bit with your experience as a district court judge?
Sure, thank you for that question. I've always said that my work as a district associate judge was some of the most impactful and important work that I will ever do as a judicial officer. It's high volume work, a lot of juvenile work, so you're really affecting families. And that work on a daily basis is really, you're making life and death decisions. I mean, that's impactful work. That work prepared me for my job as a district court judge. I believe the district associate work was invaluable to me to become a district court judge. However, I believe that the district court judge experience would be invaluable as a Court of Appeals judge, simply because the nature of the cases that you see as a district court judge, the level of felonies that you're hearing, the amount of family law that you're hearing that you don't have access to on a district associate position.
Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you. Judge, I realize the Court of Appeals is a kind of a workhorse court, if we can describe it that way, where you do a big volume and you churn out a lot of cases within the existing law. But my question is, have you given any thought to the huge societal, social issues that seem to be recurring themes in almost every juvenile case, almost every criminal case, and in many family law cases? Have you given any thought to how the Court of Appeals or our Iowa legal framework might make a difference to some of those people?
Thank you for that question, and that is something I have thought about since I was admitted to the bar in June of 1993, because I did so much work in family law and juvenile law. Those issues presented to me when I was a private practitioner, when I was a county attorney, and in particular when I was a district associate judge. At the time I was a district associate judge, I was the only judge in Woodbury County doing juvenile work on a full-time basis, and Woodbury County is second only to Polk County in numbers. So what that created was a large volume of cases, of really cases that, if you were not in the judicial system, would have a hard time believing are even occurring in your community. I mean, really hard work. So every day we work on those issues. I've sat on several commissions to try to improve issues with respect to juvenile court, access to resources, what other services we can offer parents. I just finished work on the Task Force for Families First, which is a commission to adopt a federal law that is going to support providing more front-loaded services to families before removals, and that is going to really change the way Iowa does or handles juvenile work, and it's going to benefit families.
Mr. Sukup.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I mentioned electronic exhibit management, which got me to think about electronic monitoring and other areas that might become new areas for the courts to be concerned about. Any particular areas you've worked in?
With reference to electronic exhibits.
Or electronic monitoring? Or
Sure. And I can speak to electronic exhibits and electronic docketing overall. Records in Iowa have always been public for the court system. However, what EDMS has done is made it so much more public. People can access files from their home, things that I think general public thought were private, divorces, guardianship proceedings are all become much more public. So I think it's incumbent upon the courts to make sure that as much sensitive information is protected in the way that we write our orders. With electronic, you may be hearing a divorce for a couple that has a 2-year-old, and you can be safe to assume that that child, because of EDMS, is probably going to read that decree someday. Same was true for Court of Appeals decisions. How they're written and how we treat litigants is extremely important in the age of electronic and technology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Goodman, unless you want to yield to Mr. Bloom. Mr. Goodman.
Judge, thank you for your application. I want to ask a question that others have been asked. We have 4 judges on the Court of Appeals who are from Des Moines, and then 5 other judges that are from towns of various sizes, ranging from Waterloo to Okoboji. And I'm not sure the population or the location matters as much as maybe a rural-urban mix. What I'd like to know from you, in your own words, is why is that important? And we heard from one judge this morning that said even within 3 counties within his district, justice is different. And I was kind of put back by that because our profession is one in which the rules and case law tells you what to do so that everything is supposed to be uniform within a jurisdiction. And I think he's probably right about that. I'd just like to know, why is the rural-urban mix important to the court? Certainly to the legislature, but why to the courts?
I would think for the same reason that a lot of our state government is important. I think it's important for people in the state of Iowa to look to those higher courts and believe they're represented. I hear comments from lawyers in rural areas that they consider the Court of Appeals to be a Polk County court because of the number of judges sitting there. And I think it's important to send a message that we, as a Court of Appeals, represent the entire state, and people can see a judge in their small rural community in the grocery store and know that that person's on the Court of Appeals. I think it's important to litigants. I think it's important to citizens. I think it's particularly important to trial attorneys that are doing a lot of appellate work to know that they have a voice, per se, in the appellate courts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Law.
Yes, in your materials, you gave us the case of Witten, which was a case of first impression before the Supreme Court. But what has been your most rewarding case to be involved in?
I would say as an attorney, I did a lot of adoption work, and what I always tell young lawyers is don't dabble in that because that's really critical, detailed work. Several of the cases that I did as an adoption attorney, you think that the parents are not going to contest the adoption, and then maybe an unknown father shows up later on, and a couple has had a baby for 6 months and runs the risk of losing the baby. So I'd say the most rewarding case has been when we had to try a termination and the judge found that the consents were valid. And while I was not representing the adoptive parents, certainly huge relief not have to go request that a baby in their home for 6 months would be removed. And as often as you tell prospective adoptive parents, this child is not yours until the termination is finalized. When you place a baby in someone's arms, you know, they consider that baby theirs. So that would be my most rewarding case.
Mr. Gray.
I have no intelligent questions. I will yield my time.
Ms. Pearson.
No questions.
Ms. Stanger.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Judge Schumacher.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to unpack the geographic diversity question a little bit more in this rural-urban conversation. And what I guess I'm hearing, one aspect of your response deals with leadership in the community, leadership in the judicial branch. Can you help the commission understand what role community leadership or those experiences might play into our decision this afternoon?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I agree with Commissioner Goodman that it's rural versus urban, but I also agree geographic as far as districts is important. I mean, it's not just that Sioux City doesn't have representation, being one of the larger cities in Iowa. The entire district does not have that. And when I was practicing, and I think most attorneys on the commission are viewed as leaders in their community. They're involved in a lot of activities. They're looked to as a leader in the community. I might not have always been agreed with, but I think I was always respected in my role as prosecutor and as a private practitioner. So I think the same in turn can be rolled into the Court of Appeals. It's that local community looking to see what representation they have, at least from their corner of the state, those 16 counties, representation on the Court of Appeals. And as everyone knows, the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court are not just deciding cases. They are out and about doing administrative matters. And I do think it would be important for the Court of Appeals to go on the road, perhaps more, with oral arguments, so then your own communities can look to the Court of Appeals and see representation on those courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Judge Schumacher, we're sorry we are out of time for today, but we certainly thank you for being here and we wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.